have something very special for you once again. The wonderfully talented Price of Football, no, Grant, not you, the Price of Football presenter, writer, broadcaster, he's everywhere. Kieran Maguire rejoins us again, once again. Thank you, Kieran, for joining us. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Thanks very much for the invite, guys. Always good to chat to you.
Bless you. And also joining me, as you can see, Ian Lyons and Granty Saunders, okay, from down in Sussex. Thank you for joining us, lads. Kieran, it's Palace Brighton Day today, so we may as well kick off with that to start with. Let's get it out of the way. It was a bore fest, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a shocking match, and I think it really emphasises the fact that football without fans is just glorified training exercises. If it wasn't for the fact that Sky were paying so much money for it, normally on Derby Day, and I suspect you're the same, you wake up and it's a mixture of excitement and dread, because I don't care whether we win, we mustn't lose, and I suspect your view is the same. Every time you get the ball in our half, your sphincter starts twitching, and it's no fun. But yeah, that was a shocking game of football.
And in your view, was it a penalty?
Sin given. Yeah, I think I didn't. I mean, Lamptey's. Lamptey didn't need to do what he was doing because the ball was going over Batshuayi's head, so he didn't need to get involved. And Batshuayi does what he's told to do every time. And we'd be if it was us, we'd be claiming for it. And if you're on the defending side, you're thinking it's soft, but it's not a penalty. It wasn't a definitive penalty, but it wasn't a definite not penalty either.
And
it's a referee's call.
And the Lewis Dunk red card, was that a justified red card?
Yeah, no complaints. Ball was pink. It wasn't malicious, but he got him. And it was it.
Is that the third time he's been sent off against us, or the fourth time?
Is it? Well, I certainly remember at least one. Is that the third? No.
I think that's one for the comments below when this goes out, because I certainly remember at Selhurst he got sent off after about 2 minutes, didn't he?
About 2 minutes. That's the time he won 3-1, wasn't it? Yeah. I remember that one.
So it's a game to forget, I think, for both sets of us fans, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
equal bragging rights, I think. They don't even
move on.
Nothing to see here.
Before we do move on, the shame you alluded to it a minute ago. The sadness about no football fans. The real shame with that one today, of course, is Lewis Dunk had to do the walk of shame for the entire length of the Selhurst pitch. Can you imagine the friendly group you would have got? You'd
have been waving him bye-bye.
Oh yeah.
You better believe it.
He would have revelled in it.
Kieran Maguire, I have to say to you, everywhere I turn at the moment, everywhere I look at the moment, your name pops up. Every interview, every station.
Sorry about that.
Not at all. It just goes to show how lucky we are to have you on the show. So once again, I'll echo what the boys have just said. Thank you very much. So we've got the podcast, we've got the book. We're doing 8 interviews a day. Is it? Tell me about your.
I've done 8. I actually keep it in my spreadsheet. Of course, I've done 800 this year.
That is phenomenal.
And that's newspaper, TV, radio, podcast. 800.
And
this is in my spare time.
When you say 800, is that because the taxman might be watching, or?
No, I don't get paid. So everybody thinks I'm absolutely coining it. I can put my hand in my heart. Not made a penny out of the podcast. You know what it's like, hosting costs and so on. The book sold well, but all the royalties from the book go to charity, and the BBC, Sky, ITV, they don't pay. So, but the message is getting across.
The Price of Football podcast is going from strength to strength, and I am an avid listener. Kevin, if you're listening to this, congratulations on it to both of you, because I think it's doing really well. So tell us about the book, Kieran. Have you got it there?
So about 3 years ago, I was on the. This sounds really pretentious. I was on the sofa on BBC Breakfast talking about the usual type of nonsense, and a publisher in Newcastle saw it and said, "There's nothing out there in terms of football finance. Would you fancy writing a book?" And I said, "Well, there's a reason why there's nothing out there in terms of football finance, because I don't think anybody's interested in this." But he persuaded me to write it. I mean, as you're probably aware, I'm a teacher. I actually teach football finance, and I didn't have a textbook to give to my students, so I just thought, "Oh, yeah, just sod it. I'll write it myself." And it was sort of, honestly, it was just written for my class. Yeah, it's the stuff I go through with those guys. But yeah, we're pleased. It's at one stage it was #1 in the Amazon sports charts, and there was me #1 with Peter Crouch 2 and 3. So yeah, that does make you feel good, but I don't think you have to actually sell many copies to be top of the charts these days. I suspect it's probably like music.
I think you're being very unkind to yourself. I think, from what I understand, it's a great book. So have you got a copy of it there? Tell us how I can get hold of it. How much it is?
Well, yeah, copy. It's £9.99 on Amazon. There is a Kindle version as well for around about the same price. There's not an audio book version, mainly because I thought it would sell 20 copies. I've had quite a few requests, so I'm in the middle of writing a second edition, sort of, looking at the impact of COVID and people whose interests in football aren't perhaps those of the fans who seem to want to take over football. So I'll be adding bits and pieces, but if you want to get an understanding as to sort of some of the nonsense that goes on, and football is so full of nonsense. When you've got clubs employing players' mothers on 700 grand a year to avoid financial fair play, and being sponsored by taxi companies that own no taxis, and just some of the, just some of the lunacy in the game. And part of me loves it because we want football to be nuts, and it's not just nuts on the pitch, and it's not just nuts as to what the players sometimes get up to. It's nuts in the boardroom as well.
Listen, I've got a list of 20 questions here to go through, but and we'll pick and choose some of those in a minute. But I'd rather know some more of the nut stuff, if I'm honest with you. So tell me about somebody's mother earning 700 grand a year.
Well, this was I can name the club. I can't name the player. This was Derby County, and they were trying to sign a player, but I think there were a couple of issues that. If they had paid him what his agent was asking for, the way that financial fair play works is that academy costs are excluded from financial fair play. So therefore, you pass some of the money to his mother, then that's okay. There was also an issue, is my understanding, that some of the other players in the squad, they had those clauses whereby if somebody comes in on more money than them, they get an immediate pay rise. So this wouldn't have cost Derby just what the player was asking for. It would have cost them quite a bit, because another couple of players would have been knock at the manager's door. So what the club did, and it is within the rules, which shows you just how poor the rules are, was that they employed the player's mother as an academy scout on 700 grand a year, and that way they could pay the player less, which was good for FFP, and they didn't have to give other members of the squad a pay rise. So it's all sort of looking at the small print, and people are very. And this was before Mel Morris came in, who's the present owner. So it wouldn't be polite to name the player or the mother, but his dad's name's Paul Ince.
So why am I not surprised at that? But what it does do, I mean, that point on its own just leads me on to something else, really. So why is that not rife across the football pyramid? Why is not everybody not doing it, and FFP is then not an issue anymore?
Well, there is a lot of it taking place. I think both the Premier League, UEFA and EFL have got a hard job, because I don't know whether you're aware or not, but we've now got squad salary caps in League One and League Two. And the first thing that happens is an agent phones me up and says, well, if we do this and that and the other, is that going to count towards the squad salary cap? Because if so, I'm going to represent my client and go knocking on the
sorry, Kieran,
chairman's door.
Kieran, yeah, agents are phoning you.
Yeah, I teach agents. I do a lot of whilst my main teaching's in Liverpool, but I do some teaching for other people. You get asked to do talks and presentations, so somebody going on a quiet chat, and it's great because sometimes they'll pass you on messages from WhatsApp groups, and you get to see. I'm just like you guys. I'm just a football fan, but you get to see some of the contracts and some of the things which are taking place, and you go, well, that's just staggering stuff. And also, when they get one over on a club, when they go in looking for 25 grand a week, and the first offer from the club is 35 grand a week, it is staggering.
Amazing. Listen, so I don't know if you're aware. We should do Project Big Picture, I suppose. I don't know if you're aware. In today's Sunday Times, Steve Parish wrote an article in there. Overview from you, if you'd be so kind.
Well, Project Big Picture. I've been working with the Football Supporters Association and other people. I've always taken the view, if something looks too good to be true, it's not true. So what we have at present in football is that there's a big gap between the big 6 clubs in the Premier League and the other 14, i.e. the likes of Palace, Brighton, Burnley, Fulham, and so on. And we know that. We all know where we are in the pecking order. There's a big gap between the sort of the bottom of the Premier League and the clubs who are in receipt of parachute payments. And then there's another big gap between the clubs who've got parachute payments in the Championship and the clubs that don't. So this is an idea from John Henry of Liverpool and Joel Glazer of Manchester United. And they said, we can get rid of some of those gaps, but the only way we can achieve that is by making the gap between the big 6 and the other clubs in the Premier League much, much bigger. And they just happen to be the major beneficiaries of this. So the broad idea is, first of all, you cut the Premier League to 18 clubs, but that won't affect Manchester United or Liverpool, because what they're going to do is they're going to expand the Champions League. So for you guys, how are you better off with Palace paying 34 games a season instead of 38?
You're not.
Well, yeah. So, and it's the same for me. So that seems very strange. They also plan to abolish parachute payments, and the trouble is, if you've got Wilf on an estimated 130 grand a week, I don't know exact wages, but that's the figure that's been spoken about. If Palace went down, you'd have to reduce his wages by 90%. So how on earth are you going to hold on to him if Palace went down? And the trouble is, if you do go down, then of course he's not going to want to play even more. And that means that any clubs coming in to buy him will be able to pick him up at a bargain price. How are you better off? You're not.
You're not. No, exactly.
So I think parachute payments need addressing. I think they're too high at present, but they do actually help. And it's hypocritical of the Premier League, so the EFL, to go around saying, parachute payments are wrong, they're destroying the game. Because if you get relegated from the EFL to the National League, you get parachute payments. They don't publicise that, do they? So there's an awful lot of double standards being employed. There's £250. They're saying we're going to give £250 million to clubs in the Championship, and you're going to get a quarter of the deal negotiated by the Premier League. Now, I've got a copy of the full document. Okay, so somebody leaked the full document to me. So I went through the small print, and what you actually find is that £250 million, which is great, I don't have a huge issue with that, is actually an advance of the money you're going to get from the TV deal. So it's not an extra £250 million, it's the equivalent of a payday loan. And then when you go again into the small print of Project Big Picture, it's going to allow the clubs to sell their overseas rights for up to 8 games and keep the money themselves. So if you're Liverpool or Manchester United, which 8 games are you going to choose to keep the rights for yourself?
Against the big 6, top 6.
Against the big 6, right. Yep. So the Premier League, which sells the rest of the rights, what is it selling? And also, if you're Palace, who are you going to pick? You're going to pick Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, West Ham. You'll probably pick our game as well, because it's a derby game and so on. So therefore, the Premier League will be trying to sell Palace versus West Brom, Palace versus Burnley, Palace versus Leicester. They're not going to get the £1.3 billion a year that they're presently getting from the sale of the deal. So whilst the EFL clubs will get 25%, they'll get 25% of a much smaller pot. That's not being communicated to clubs. The Carabao Cup is going to be binned. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not bothered. I suspect you guys aren't either.
No, not at all. I don't think anyone's bothered, to be honest.
No, yeah, and I agree with you entirely. But when you take a look at the EFL TV deal with Sky, 2/3 of that is for the Carabao Cup. So although the EFL club say, well, we still get our own TV deal, actually, when you talk to people in broadcasting, they're not interested in the first few rounds. Gillingham versus Rotherham. If that's live on TV, even who's going to watch? So it's only because Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal and Chelsea and that lot, they come in the third round and then they tend to dominate the competition that Sky are willing to pay for the money. So we've now got the EFL clubs getting an advance, which is fine, but it's an advance of far less than they thought they were getting. Their own cup competition goes, and you talk to owners of clubs. If you are Gillingham, if you are Colchester, and you get Spurs at home or Chelsea at home, it's a big day for the town. Yeah. That's now so. Therefore, your chance of hosting these big teams has now been halved. Football is going to change, and we have to accept that. But the way that it has been sold to the clubs and to the media requires a bit of greater scrutiny. There's no scrutiny within the EFL themselves because there was a report. I was quite close to the Bury case, and they then said, right, we're going to have an independent review of the way we run football. So a QC comes in, does all the stuff that these really smart guys do. His main recommendation is the EFL has 3 independent directors to make sure that it does the right thing. And the EFL accepted all the recommendations apart from that one. So there's at the top, they can do what they want.
Kieran, I've got I've got more than a few questions, as I'm sure lots of people watching this will have about it. But you said at the start that you have a copy of the big picture, but I understand it's something like version 18. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which
it is version 18.
Which would suggest that this has been simmering and being spoken about and drafted for quite a while. What are your thoughts on that? And as to whom, I know you've mentioned 2 people, but there are 3 or 4 people that have been associated with it. Who do you think is the real driver behind this?
The real drivers behind this is Manchester United and Liverpool. They're both American owners. They both feel that their clubs are undervalued. Manchester United and Liverpool are the crown jewels of the Premier League, in my view. They're the most popular clubs globally. If you take a look at the size of both of those clubs, they're both around about 4 times the size of Palace and Brighton in terms of the money they generate. Now, what they've said is that's not greedy enough. We want to be 10 times the size. And we're not interested in competition. So this actually started. If you want to go and point the fingers at who's responsible, actually it's Leicester City Football Club, because they had the cheek in 2016 to win the Premier League and take one of the Champions League spots, which Manchester United and Liverpool think should be theirs by right. So again, when you take a look at the proposals for the way that TV money is going to be split, if United or Liverpool have a poor season under the Project Big Picture proposals, the TV money is split on how you've performed over the previous 3 seasons. So therefore, if United or Liverpool have a bad season, they're still going to pick up a huge wedge from the Premier League TV deal. So it's driven by Manchester United and Liverpool. The FA were involved in discussions at one point. It was sold to them as a way of addressing fixture congestion, but all that they're going to do is to replace a slimmed down Premier League with more pre-season friendlies. They want to be involved in the FIFA World Club Championship. FIFA want to expand that to 24 clubs. There's the International Champions Cup, which is just a glorified pre-season. That wants to expand to 20 clubs as well. And of course, these people want to be involved because that's where the money lies as far as they're concerned.
I mean, there is another name that you haven't yet mentioned. That's Rick Parry. And I've got my views on his roles in it. Obviously, he's got historical links with the likes of Liverpool as well. But do you think he's being used as a stalking horse to get what they want in, or do you think he's actually an integral part of this?
I don't know, and I'm in a slightly conflicted position because he's on the management committee where I work.
Oh.
But
oh dear.
Yeah. But I'm.
I won't push you any further on that. Don't worry about it. It's not a problem.
It's okay. I have seen messages. I mean, I went on. I wrote articles for the newspapers when this first happened in March, and I said I felt that the Premier League does have a responsibility to the broader football pyramid. I still don't believe that it has to go and bail out the Championship, because if you take an example of a club such as Bournemouth have just been relegated. This season they're going to get £42 million in parachute payments. They've sold Nathan Ake and they've sold Callum Wilson. The manager has gone, so they got him off the payroll. Ryan Fraser has gone, they've got him off the payroll. If they wanted to, they could have sold Josh King and David Brooks, but they chose not to. So, and also that they're owned by a Russian oligarch via a company in the British Virgin Islands. Why should Crystal Palace give money to Bournemouth under those circumstances? Can somebody explain to me?
I think this is what Steve Parish has been saying all along, isn't it? You're not expecting the likes of Waitrose and Marks and Spencer's to subsidise the corner shops on the corner, etc. But I mean,
Bournemouth aren't even a corner shop, are they?
No, they're just a tin pot club on the south coast, but of which there are numerous. But it's interesting what you were saying about the wealth of the owners, because a lot of people would be surprised to know that I would say off the top of my head about half have owners that are worth hundreds of millions and billions in the case of probably about 6 or 7 of them. So just as we wouldn't expect a handout necessarily because we've got billionaire owners, obviously you got Mr. Blue and other people. I think it is a bit of a cheek. Where I would say, and I think that the big picture, one of the few valid points it has is about the money getting down to the lower level. And by low level, I don't mean the Championship. I mean League One, League Two, National as well.
Hold that for a minute, because I'm coming on to that in a second, if you don't mind, because it's actually one of my questions from the guys. On that subject, questions crew, thank you for all your questions out there. Particularly Nigel Croucher and Andrew Adams. You've done some sterling work, and I'm coming on to them in a minute. Grant, you wanted to chuck something in there?
I'll be sitting back listening to this, thoroughly enjoying it, thinking, actually, I should actually be involved in this, shouldn't I? Kieran, we've you and I have had some fun during COVID, during lockdown, with our barbecues in the area. But COVID should have really provided a sense of reality to the whole world, especially the football area. I'm a football fan, but it really pisses me off that so much importance has been placed on football. We must get it back into people's life, etc. And it all comes down to money, which is why we're speaking to you. Should this experience not have helped, if not force, Premier League clubs and subsequent divisions clubs reining in on their spending. I mean, recent spending in transfer windows, etc., prove they're not doing that. It's two parts to this question. That's the first part. The second part is the other end of the scale is the supporter. We're getting fleeced at the moment. At Palace, the experience with season tickets, please tell me if it's the same at other clubs, is we were not asked, we were told we had to renew our season tickets. The likelihood is we would not be using them and would give you a refund at the end of the season. So I'm not going to say we're bankrolling the business, because we're not bankrolling. We're putting an injection of cash in there. We may be supporting the staff, keeping them in a job, I don't know. But so the first part of the question is the spending, you know, the amount of money that's being spent, and then the fan at the street level is being fleeced. What's the experience across the whole of the football window with that, across other clubs?
If you take a look at spending in League One and League Two, it's close to zero. You know, the only clubs that have spent money is when they've actually sold players first.
Yeah.
That's broadly been the case in the Championship. I think the only sort of major transfer that I've seen is when Brentford signed Ivan Toney, but that's because they knew that they were selling Ollie Watkins at the time. So when we talk about spending, if you take Palace, Brighton, Burnley, Leicester, Newcastle, you know, look at those clubs. Between us, 5 clubs between them. I suspect that our combined net spend is somewhere about £10 million between us. We've signed 2 free transfers: Danny Welbeck and Alan Lallana. We signed a centre half from Ajax for 900 grand because he had a release in his contract, and we signed a few kids. So, you know, Palace, I know you've signed Eze, and that's about it. You know, in terms of money, big money signings. So Burnley haven't spent any money. Newcastle have been quiet as well. So I think that there's an issue that the focus has been on spending at the top of the Premier League, and I think you've got to look at the people involved. Roman Abramovich sold one of his other businesses over the course of the summer for £1.5 billion. So therefore, giving Frank Lampard 200 million to spend on, you know, a series of players, but not bother with his defence is a separate issue. You know, it's small change. If you look at Manchester City, they hadn't spent money last year because they genuinely feared being kicked out of Europe. So they didn't want to spend money in 2019-20 if they then had 2 seasons when they couldn't compete in the Champions League. As soon as their case was overturned, their budget changed like that, because the Champions League is worth somewhere between, for a club of, you know, let's assume that City get minimum to the quarterfinals, probably the semis. It's worth a minimum of £80 million. It could be worth 120 million, depending on how far you go. So can you see immediately they've got another £80 million to play with? So yes, there has been spending. It looks as if the Premier League is completely out of touch with all the millions of people who are being in genuine fear of losing their jobs, who have been furloughed, and so on. But Roman Abramovich doesn't have to worry about paying the bills. Manchester City's owners are the same. So I agree with you that the spending looks bad, but it has actually been concentrated by very, very few clubs themselves. And I can't remember what your second question is because I spoke for so long.
The second part of the question, Kieran, is about the fan, the supporter. It's hard enough as it is. You alluded earlier on to we're in a face of reality of losing jobs, etc., etc., etc. And yet clubs, well, our club, Palace, when I say our, 3 of our clubs,
yeah,
it's squeezing the life out of a lot of the supporters through demands to pay for your season to get up front. We'll give you a refund in the season if you don't use it. I hope they just say that the whole season's written off, but the club will hold on to that money. I mean, we had to fight to get the refund for the whatever anyway after our season. But is this? I just want to know, is this widespread across the whole of the divisions? I know for a fact that Wolves didn't renew season tickets, and they said, okay, they paid for matches on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah.
And Palace were saying, okay, £200 and you can reserve your seat, but it doesn't entitle you to anything. So it's the man on the street who is getting squeezed even further out of the game.
Yeah.
So
Well, first of all,
across the leagues,
from a contractual point of view, Crystal Palace Football Club have failed to deliver a service which you paid for. So therefore, they're obliged to give you your money back. Yeah, so that contractually, trying to enforce that, you don't want to do that. You love your club, and no football fan wants to go. But it would take ages. You might have to get a class action and so on. We are seeing different approaches taken by different clubs. I think Manchester United have actually been very good on this. Sheffield United have, Wolves have. I know after the pay-per-view issue arose last weekend, my club had a board meeting on Monday, and then they went onto the internet. Yeah, they held a meeting with fans via Zoom, in effect, to say, if you want your money back, you can have it back now. So I think because they didn't want fans to be out of pocket, to have paid for a season ticket and then have to go and pay 15 quid a throw, we don't know how many times before the end of the season, before finally giving them a refund at the end of the season. I think that's indefensible, regardless of the club. The worst club, Newcastle United. They have been an absolute pain in the arse. They have genuinely just prevaricated. They said, yes, we will give you a refund, but we're not going to tell you when. One of the issues at Newcastle is that many fans have bought multi-year season tickets, and the club is just keeping the fans at arm's length. Newcastle United fans have been really well organised themselves. And I've got to say, as a fellow football fan, and we're ultimately, we're Brighton and Palace. For 90 minutes, twice a year, we're going to give it that. But I think we've got far more in common than we've got that separates us. We're all football fans.
Absolutely.
Newcastle United Football Club, Newcastle United Fans Trust, what they said, don't pay £14.95. Instead, Newcastle United Food Bank Trust, which is connected to the football, give £14.95 to that instead, if you can afford it. And I think they've raised £16,000 overnight. 1,000 fans have said, no, we're not going to give this money to Sky. We're not going to give this money to the Premier League under the present conditions. We recognise, as you've implied, Grant, that there's a lot of people struggling. And for those of us that aren't struggling hugely, we're good guys and we're good girls, and we're going to help those who are less fortunate than ourselves. And when you hear stuff like that, it makes you really proud to be an English football fan. And also, you don't get any of this stuff coming from the Project Big Picture people. What they're selling is the Football Supporters Association. They describe it as a sugar-coated cyanide pill for football, and I think that's a very fair assessment.
And do you know what? I'm going to jump in there if I may. A couple of things came to mind while you were talking. I absolutely echo everything from Newcastle United. Guys, whoever's listening to this, please do not subscribe to the $14.99 pay-per-view. Okay, I think you've been fleeced enough as it is. Do what Newcastle are doing. Use the food bank. And Kieran, just going back to your book a minute, what Kieran hasn't told you, ladies and gentlemen, is all proceeds for his book is on sale now for $9.99. Tell them where it's going to, please, Kieran.
All 100% of the royalties are going to the Trussell Trust. It's a national food bank charity. When the book went on sale in January, COVID was just starting, and I took the view that I'm fortunate. I've still got a job. I've never received a royalty check, so therefore I'm never going to miss receiving a royalty check. So 100% of the royalties. It is a fantastic cause. We'd all like to be living in a society where we don't need the likes of the Trussell Trust, but at present we do. So it doesn't matter what your politics are. This isn't a point-scoring exercise. So if you want to read it, hopefully you might find it of some use if you're any interested in the football finance side of things. But it is going to a good cause. It's not going to my back pocket. It's not going to my Brighton season ticket. It's going to people in need.
And they're clearly, and you're to be commended for it. There's clearly an appetite. Since you've started doing all this stuff all over the planet, I mean, there's a massive call for people to know and understand better football finance, and I think you need to take the credit for it. You're driving it.
Well, I mean, I'm not, because I mean I'm copying a guy called Swiss Ramble on Twitter, except he lives in Switzerland. I the podcast I do with Kevin, and Kevin's got to take a huge amount of credit for this because he makes it really accessible. It has been very successful. We're not denying that. But when myself and Kevin first met, we honestly felt, because it wasn't our idea, it was actually the producer. We looked at each other and we said, well, this is going to be a bit embarrassing. It will last 3 weeks. We'll have 20 people listening to it. And then we'll just pretend it will never happen. You know, like some of the one night stands you might have had back in your youth. You go, oh my God, I go, pretend it doesn't happen.
Did I really?
Nick can't remember that far back.
But yeah, there has been an appetite for it. With the fact that we're now doing, instead of what we used to do once a week for 20 minutes, the fact that we're now doing 2 hours a week, and we could easily fit in a third show, except I can't afford the divorce that would go along with that. Because to put together a show takes about 5 or 6 hours of research every time. Then we've got to do the recording and so on. So I've got Grant knows my wife. He knows that she's very tolerant, but even so, there's a limit, I think, to what I can get away with.
Well, you mentioned on one of the podcasts last week, okay, and this brings me straight into one of the questions from the guys, okay. You mentioned radical ideas for Division 1 and Division 2. Ask Kieran about his radical ideas for Division 1 and Division 2. The question why football doesn't think outside the box and why the Premier League wants more control.
Well, all I suggested was that the Premier League can give a greater proportion of its money to Leagues 1 and 2. But Leagues 1 and 2 are not a threat to the Premier League. And here I'm in agreement with Steve Parish. What I also suggested was to have a 1% levy on all gross football bets. And that would raise about £140 million a year. And in terms of transfers, to have a 3% levy on all transfers of more than £10 million. So again, if you're in League 1 and 2, practically for everybody in the Championship as well, you're not going to be affected. If you are in the Premier League, then again, this is opportunity for the game to give a little bit of money, maybe about £30 million a year, and that would flow into grassroots football, into lower leagues and so on. So this would allow those clubs in the lower leagues who do a hell of a lot for their communities. I mean, I work in Liverpool. I've been to Tranmere and met Mark Palios, who runs that club, along with his wife Nikki, and they're absolutely brilliant. And I know that speaking to Kevin, how much that the Palace fans and the community schemes are so well ingrained, and all the great work they do. Well, that applies to smaller clubs as well. So that was my proposals for Leagues 1 and 2, and effectively it would pay for itself to support the lower leagues. In terms of the Championship, I'd certainly reduce parachute payments. Wouldn't necessarily get rid of them, but Glazer and Henry, they're not interested in things of that nature. There was a really good article in The Athletic, and I know it's behind a paywall, but it is actually pretty good value. You can get it if you hunt around, you get it at a dirt cheap price. And that they've got journalists who sort of go into this in depth, and they said it summed it up really well. Joel Glazer and John Henry, they want more control, they want more money, and they want more certainty. So another of the ideas in Project Big Picture is dropping from 3 clubs to be relegated. The club that finishes third would now appear in the playoffs. Now, if you've got a Premier League squad, who are you going to be playing? You're now going to be playing the side who are 5th in the Championship. So, realistically, 60-70% of the time at least, that club's going to avoid relegation in terms of the playoffs. So that's the way it would go. And also, one other issue, which again would have an impact upon Palace and Brighton, not denying this, is that all of the voting power would be concentrated in the hands of 9 clubs. They're not the 9 clubs who have won the most trophies in the Premier League, they are the 9 clubs who have the most consecutive seasons. So Leicester wouldn't qualify, and Leicester have won the Premier League more recently than Arsenal, Manchester United and Spurs. They wouldn't get a vote. But Joel Glazer and John Henry, if Steve Parish and his 2 partners wanted to sell Palace, let's say a Saudi Arabian investment fund came in, they would have the power of veto, because what they do not want is anybody threatening their monopoly of places in the Champions League. That's the proposals.
I know we've done the project big picture, but just from what you just said, something else came to my mind. And so, tell me about the dogs. Whose are the dogs?
That's Grant knows the dog. He's my dog Finley. He's a bit lively. He's very friendly.
Lovely, great name for a dog. It's also Eddie Johnson's eldest son's name is Finley. Did you know that?
Oh well, no, I didn't. No.
There you go.
Now.
Useless information point. So, just finishing off what you were just saying, I've got a question about, and this is not from the questions crew. This is from my head now live. Okay, haven't Liverpool and Man United brought the Premier League into disrepute?
Well, at a time when football clubs have been doing, I think some football clubs have been doing some pretty amazing things in the main, but they've not taken the furlough. I mean, Liverpool did, of course. It was only because Liverpool's fans said, we're not prepared to accept this. Before moving down to next bit to be Grant's neighbour, I've lived the last 40 years of my life in Manchester. Manchester United have been absolutely brilliant during the pandemic. And all of the goodwill that club has earned over the last 6 months has been destroyed in a flash with these, because these schemes, as you rightly said, we're on version 18. These schemes have been taking place for over 3 years. And the other clubs, Steve Parish didn't know about it. That's why he got so angry. Tony Bloom didn't know about it. Tony Bloom might not have paid to go and have Falmer built our stadium if he'd known that effectively.
Although under the proposals, he might get half the cost back. Is that right?
It would actually be a quarter.
Okay.
But he wasn't told about it at the time. Remember, we weren't in the Premier League at the time.
So my thought process here is, if they were being underhand and obviously holding talks with each other behind everybody else's back, and only the top 6 would get the votes. At the moment, all Premier League teams get the vote. Can the other Premier League teams say, hang on a minute, we've still got a vote. We vote you out the Premier League. I mean, surely must be ramifications for what they were doing in the background.
It's really awkward because, rightly or wrongly, Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, Spurs, they drive ratings for Sky. So Sky wouldn't be happy. And they do that both domestically and overseas. We all know that we're recording this Sunday night. Tomorrow at 5:30, West Bromwich Albion versus Burnley for £14.95 at 5:30 on a Monday evening. Who's going to pay for that? Nobody. So the big clubs are aware that they are actually they have an element of power and they're exploiting it. That the Football Association has what's referred to as a golden share as far as the Premier League is concerned, and it can veto any proposals. So it could have vetoed this power grab. And another thing in Project Big Picture was to give the Football Association a £100 million gift. Now, if this had been Qatar trying to get the World Cup and they'd given a £100 million gift to somebody who was voting on a key decision relating to them, how would you describe that gift, chaps?
4 letters, bung, bribe, bung, brown envelope.
5 letters.
Yeah.
I can't possibly comment, of course. But it just makes so. The Manchester United and Liverpool, I think they were torn a strip. I think Villa, Everton, and a few other clubs really had a go at them when the Premier League had a meeting last Wednesday. but they didn't apologise. And Project Big Picture has not been killed off. It will. There will be.
It's just been deferred. Yeah.
They're testing the water.
Been deferred. Yeah.
They're testing the water with what they can. They're seeing what they can and can't get away with. And for me, this is a thin end of the wedge. Go, Nick. Go on. I know you've got plenty of questions. Go on.
I'll tell you a couple of things. It's been muted for years, hasn't it? The Barcelona, Real Madrid, a Super League of some description. And by the way, while we are watching this live, guys, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. Tottenham 3, West Ham 3.
Yeah.
No, one of the quite. Yeah, absolutely.
I think I've got that in the prediction league.
I got down for a fiver for a draw.
Right, COVID was meant to rein in the club's spending. That's what we were told. But the Premier League clubs spending 1.12 billion. Have lessons not been learnt, Kieran?
Well, I mean, as we had a previous discussion, that spending has been very much concentrated in the balance sheets of very few clubs. So, what clubs want to do, they know that if they qualify for the Champions League, it's worth between 100 and 150 million pounds, and therefore they think it's worth pursuing. It has. I think some clubs have cut back on their spending because it's costing Palace. Realistically, it's costing you £750,000 a match if you're playing behind closed doors, because the money's going to have to come back to you at some point. It's just a case of when.
Kieran, other end of the scale, where we talk about things, clubs, etc., falling apart. I think you said you alluded you're involved in the Bury situation. Do you have knowledge, or do you have an opinion? How many clubs are close to the wire right now? How many could actually be out of business after this COVID thing has gone away? If that's this year, next year, whatever. How many have got the HMRC knocking at the door?
At present, I think we're in a bit of a phony war because furlough has worked, because the Premier League and the EFL are making it out that the Premier League given no help. No, the Premier League have helped. They've advanced this season's solidarity payments. They're worth £4.5 million to a Championship club. They're worth best part of £1 million to clubs in Leagues 1 and League 2. So the Premier League's advanced money, the EFL has advanced money from its own TV deal. So that's given them a bit of breathing space. It's allowed them to pay the wages in August and September. We're now reaching crunch point because those monies are starting to run out.
Yeah.
Trying to find the money to pay the October wage bill is going to be a real struggle for some clubs. Southend have got a winding up order already from HMRC. Those clubs that have been poorly run, and there is an awful lot of them, of the 72 clubs in the EFL, I think I worked out that 51 of them had lost money last year pre-COVID. So therefore, it's going to be high risk, and it really comes down to, have they managed to get any money from selling players? But there's not that many buyers. A club like Exeter City got a windfall because Ollie Watkins was sold to Brentford, and Exeter, I think, were entitled to 15% of the fee. So some clubs will survive. Some clubs have got owners who can find the money. Other clubs I know where the fans have said, we will gift you our season ticket because we want to have a club to support in 2022. But not everybody's in those financial circumstances. Many club owners have their own businesses which have struggled financially as a result of COVID, so that they can't support the football club as well. So we will be reaching crunch point in October, November, December, when the wage bill is due. That could be a huge issue. Players won't get paid. We don't know when the government's going to ask the PAYE to be paid. As soon as that happens, we're going to hit an almighty buffer.
Can I ask you a specific on that one? Sunderland, how are they doing?
Remember, Sunderland have had 3 years of money in the form of parachute payments. They've sold players. They've managed to get, I think, all the high earners off the wage bill. Sunderland have borrowed money from Michael Dell, the computer billionaire. So we don't know how much they've borrowed. We don't know what interest rates. They've certainly got high overheads, but I think because they have borrowed the money, and I suspect that if they don't repay it, it will convert into shares. So this could be an opportunity for a power grab at Sunderland. I think they'll be okay, although Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven aren't hugely wealthy themselves.
How long will OK last?
Sorry?
How long will OK last, you think? As a club, as a ground, as a set of fans, they're a huge club. They're a huge club, but it's in such a depressed area.
It is. I think for an area such as Sunderland, the one thing that they've got in their favour is that they won't let the club die. The fans themselves, that they will come up with something. And we have also seen Oliver Dowden, the sports minister, say the government will not let any clubs in League One and League Two go bust. Now we've got to hold him to that. I don't care where people's party politics are. We've had on the podcast, we've had Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, on. He's Labour. We've had one of the guys from DCMS, who's Conservative MP, Damien Collins, and he was absolutely superb. He really knows his stuff. On Tuesday, I'm talking to the all-party parliamentary group, so I'm going to try and just get some communication across broadly. It's going to be a Zoom conversation. I'm absolutely terrified, being grilled by MPs, but the same stuff that we've been saying to you guys, that there are some clubs in far greater needs than others, and we mustn't fall into the trap by saying just because Chelsea went and spent £250 million that everybody in football is awash with money, because that's not the case at Palace, that's not the case at Brighton, that's not the case at Burnley, and so on.
And if anybody can get the word from the man in the street across that government body, you can. Question 6 was, if you were to put all the countries in a league table of financial well-being, where would the English leagues be placed?
The Premier League would be close to the top, and the reason for that is that the Premier League TV deal is extremely good. Both domestically and overseas, it's streets ahead of other countries. I did a presentation for this sounds like name dropping, but I'm genuinely not. I was asked to do a presentation for the Dutch FA earlier this week, and it was interesting listening to them. That what we're seeing here in England is starting to repeat itself overseas, that as things get worse and worse, the clubs stop operating together and everybody's being driven by self-interest. In the Eredivisie, in the Netherlands, at the start of the season, they were allowed to have crowds of up to 20% of capacity, as we were hoping to have, but that has now stopped. So I'd say England, Germany are in strong positions. Spain is in a terrible position because the big clubs there have huge wage bills, and they have big grounds, so which they normally have huge attendances as well. So that's why we've seen Barcelona and Real Madrid be very, very quiet this summer. And remember, those are fan-owned clubs as well.
Right, listen, I'm conscious about the amount of time we're taking up here. I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit in a minute. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions and then formally invite you back for another one of these, because of the big picture. I think we've covered an awful lot of ground, and I've actually ignored my list of questions, really. Would you be so kind in the future to come and join us again?
Yeah, absolutely. Delighted to, lads.
I'll throw another one in there, because you've just been talking about the European leagues, and one of them is relevant to that. Is Brexit going to be a good or bad thing for a club of Palace's size when bringing in overseas talent?
I think on balance, it's not good for Palace. I think it's fine for the likes of Manchester United and Liverpool, because what the present proposals, and it could be that the Premier League might be able to negotiate a better deal with the government here. It's trying to get support from the EFL. The EFL aren't particularly bothered. I think the issue is going to be that if Palace want to recruit players from Europe, they will have to satisfy the same criteria as non-European players. So therefore, realistically, they have to be in one of the top FIFA, the FIFA rankings, top 50. Their existing wage packet will have to be a high amount. Palace will have to be paying them a high salary and things of this nature. Manchester United and Liverpool, where are they recruiting players from? They're recruiting players from Italy, Spain, Portugal. They're recruiting, established internationals. Palace don't have the money to go out and sign someone like Bruno Fernandes. No. You're looking at a different level of player, and therefore that player might not satisfy the rules. So I think it's going to be tougher for Palace. Doesn't it? Tougher doesn't mean impossible. And from a development point of view, it is going to give greater opportunities for players who have come through your academy. So, as you've seen, if you take Max Meyer, I think it's fair to say he's not proven to be the player you'd hoped him to be. Well, and you're paying him a hell of a lot of money as well. That's sort of reasonable. Well, that gives an opportunity to one of your youth players. So, for every negative aspect, there's a positive. And I always try to be as positive as I can. Manchester United will still be fishing in the same pool as before. It will be more complicated for Palace. More complicated doesn't mean impossible.
Brilliant. Grant, last thing from you?
That's cool. Put me under the bus. Someone's asked a question about shirts, Kieran. And the cost, The cost of shirts, the playing strip, the cost of shirts, it costs so much to buy the same sort of shirt, different badge on it from one club to the other, and your opinions on that. I think what's a shirt from our club? Is it about 45 quid? I don't know. I didn't know last time I bought one. Nick, Ian, any idea? Let's say it's 45 quid. Man United, 60, 70 quid?
Yeah, ridiculous.
Brighton, how much is the Brighton shirt? Do you know, Kieran?
52.
You see why
it's large variation,
It's what from the manufacturer's point of view, the way that shirt sales work is that they effectively give the clubs a guaranteed amount of money each season, plus a percentage on each shirt. Now, the manufacturers, they know what they think people are be prepared to pay. And again, it's a bit like this $14.95 for pay-per-view. If I got a club shirt from Clapton, they're a community club, and they actually came on our show a few weeks ago, and we were so impressed, myself and Kevin. I said, well, the least I can do is go and buy one of your shirts, expecting to pay 45 quid, something like that. It was 30 quid.
Yeah.
Now, let's be honest, we're gentlemen of a particular age.
Late 20s.
We don't need an athletic shirt. So, to be charging us 50 quid, there is an element of exploitation. What normally happens with a deal is that the club will be on about 7% commission on each shirt. So you pay 45 quid. What's 7% of that? That's about three quid the club will get every time. Plus it will get an agreed fee. Shirt inflation is something that amazes me. The fact that for Manchester United and Liverpool, I think 70 quid is now the start price for a shirt, and then you pay for your badges and bits and pieces on top. Shirt inflation is one of those things. It's a bit like Sky and what they've charged for Sky Sports. That's always gone way ahead of inflation. But whilst we keep paying it, then they're going to say, well, what's the problem? So I think it's up to us to turn round. But football shirts, it was only about 5 years ago that your home shirt and away shirt would last you 2 years. Now both the home shirt and the away shirt are changed for every club every season.
And a third kit.
And a third kit as well, exactly.
Yeah.
And a third kit, yeah.
So,
I've seen
And it's
that
become a big event.
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand with the shirts. I was at the International Cup in Hong Kong, and it's 99.99% Liverpool fans in the ground. And they had, I think, 4 or 5 pop-up shops in the ground selling shirts, and they had queues, unbelievable queues. If you remember the old days in the 70s, guys, when we queued around Sellers Park for tickets for Liverpool, they had queues like that for these places. Ian's the sky there. They had queues massive. I mean, their shirts, the shirt sales alone for that one match was just pathetic.
and that's what you get for what you get for being a global brand like Man United and Liverpool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ian, last thought from you.
Just quickly, Kieran, what is the way forward with this? Where do we go with this? Where does the big picture go now?
It will come back in a slightly diluted form.
The not so big.
Not so big picture. I honestly suspect we are moving towards an 18-team Premier League. The Carabao Cup, let's be honest, nobody's going to miss it. The only people, ironically, the only people who genuinely used to benefit from the Carabao Cup were clubs in the EFL.
Yeah.
And this scheme, which is supposedly going to save them, is actually bad news for them. Football is going to change because, unlike Germany, we do not have a mechanism. We do not have a structure which prevents. And this doesn't make me a little England or anything like that. We do not have anything which prevents outside interests coming over and taking control of individual clubs with a view to taking over the game itself. So football, let's hope we have this conversation in 10 years' time. We will be looking at a completely different vehicle. What you will find by then is that probably it won't be just 8 games a season that the Big Six are broadcasting for themselves overseas. It will be all of the home games. And I know, Grant, you've not missed a Palace match, home or away, for God knows how many years. Palace are in the Premier League. Oh, by the way, next weekend, Palace are playing. They're playing against Chelsea in Dubai because it raises more money. Yeah, we've seen that with the NFL. What these owners have seen is that the NFL has been successful in doing this, that, and the other. We're going to take the most lucrative parts of the NFL, but we're going to ignore those parts of the NFL which actually make it very competitive. So they have a wage cap in the top division. Well, we're not going to see that in the Premier League because that will make the Premier League more competitive.
Drafting.
The draft system, the fact that in the NFL, the home team keeps 60% of the gate receipts and the other 40% go into a general pool, which is then split between all the teams. You're not going to see Manchester United or Liverpool voting for that, are you?
No.
I think, gentlemen, we better call it, draw a line under it there. Kieran, as always, you've been outstanding. Personally, I could sit here and talk to you all night, but I know I've got a roast dinner at City and I've got to go and eat, or otherwise I'm going to get told off. Ian and Grant, thanks for joining me, mate, lads, and I'll talk to you later. Kieran Maguire, please commit to coming back to see us again very soon.
Of course, anytime, guys.
You have been a superstar.
Always good to have a chat.
Go on.
What I'll do is I'll put a link into Kieran's book on Amazon when this goes out. So look in the comments below for that link. And Kieran has already agreed to provide us with a signed copy that we'll give away in a forthcoming show. So keep your eyes out for that competition.
What's the shirt behind you, Kieran?
Sorry?
What's the shirt behind you?
The shirt behind me, this is Paul McShane's shirt from the 18th of October 2005, the 15th anniversary of today. I can't remember who the opponents were. I remember Paul McShane scoring the winning goal.
Cool. I was trying to see it, but couldn't work it out.
Guys, we'll call it quits there. Kieran Maguire, as always, you've been a superstar. Thank you very much and good night.
Okay, thanks guys. Stay safe.